Valera pressed her appendages against the translucent medical tablet, scrolling through the assignment roster with measured precision. Year 2478. Helix Delta 4 Neutral Medical Station. Her first rotation in the human ward. The soft purple bioluminescence of her skin dimmed slightly as anxiety rippled through her energy field. As an Anathari nurse, Valera had studied human physiology extensively in theory, but actual contact with the species had been limited to mandatory cross-species training simulations. Real humans were unpredictable. "First day with the bipeds?" a voice chimed behind her, the harmonic frequencies instantly identifying the speaker as Dr. Zorlak, her supervisor. "Yes, senior physician. I've completed all 17 modules on human emergency care," Valera responded, her skin brightening with professional pride, including the special addendum on their unique circulatory system. Dr. Zorlak's gelatinous form shimmered with what Valera recognized as the Morelbian equivalent of amusement. "Modules are one thing. Wait until you see them leak their red fluid from virtually anywhere at the slightest provocation." Valera's skin pulsed with determination. "I am prepared for all standard human medical emergencies." "Of course you are," Dr. Zorlak burbled, leaving a slight residue of doubt on the floor as he oozed away. "Remember Protocol 376 if they become agitated." Valera had memorized all 4,822 protocols for interspecies medical care. Protocol 376, in case of human agitation, offer hydration, and observe for signs of physical expansion. Whatever that meant. The pneumatic doors to the human ward slid open with a reassuring hiss. Valera straightened her uniform, a simple metallic band that identified her professional status, while leaving her energy-absorbing skin unobstructed. "Nurse Valera reporting for rotation Alpha 6, she announced to the monitoring system. The station's AI responded in the neutrally pleasant tone used throughout galactic medical services. "Acknowledged. Current patient load. 1. Private Jackson Reeve, human male, 28 standard years, minor training injury, Bay 3. "Only one patient." Valera's anxiety dispersed slightly. A perfect introduction to practical human care. Bay 3 was standard issue. Atmosphere calibrated to Earth normal. Gravity set to 1G. Temperature at what Valera considered uncomfortably warm. The human male lay on the medical platform, apparently in the state humans called sleep. A bandage covered his upper left appendage, arm. She corrected herself mentally. Valera consulted the medical readout. Private Reeve had sustained a minor laceration during combat training, requiring 15 sutures. The wound had been treated by the automated system 2 hours prior, and he had been administered a mild analgesic. Standard procedure called for observation for another cycle to ensure no adverse reactions to treatment. Simple enough. Valera would monitor, document, and release. She began recording her observations in precise, measured tones. "Subject appears to be in resting state. Respiratory rate 16 per minute, within normal human parameters. Skin coloration consistent with baseline records. Wound site showing no signs of..." Private Reeve shifted suddenly, his eyes opening. Valera paused her recording, her luminescence dimming automatically in response to potential patient distress. "Good cycle, Private Reeve," she said in carefully practiced standard English. "I am Nurse Valera. How would you rate your pain on the universal scale?" The human blinked several times, his pupils adjusting to the light. When he focused on Valera, his mouth formed what she recognized as the human expression of surprise. "Whoa," he said, pushing himself up to a seated position with his uninjured arm. "You're glowing." Anathari physiology utilizes bioluminescence for communication and energy conversion, Valera explained, used to this reaction from species with limited sensory capabilities. "Please rate your pain." Private Reeve looked down at his bandaged arm and winced slightly. "About a 3, I guess. Feels like I got jabbed by an angry Martian sand wasp." Can I get cleared to go back to training? Valira consulted her tablet. Negative. Protocol requires observation for a minimum of 1 full cycle following treatment. The human sighed dramatically, a behavior Valira had studied but still found perplexing. The expulsion of air served no apparent physiological function beyond expressing emotional states. Great, stuck in medbay while my unit's running drills. Look, I feel fine. The doc patched me up good before he left. Dr. Arlen has been called to another emergency, Valira informed him. I am authorized to conduct your post-treatment assessment. Private Reeves seemed to study her for a moment. First time working with humans? Valira's surprise manifested as a brief pulse of bright light. Is it obvious? Just a little, he smiled, displaying teeth in what her training indicated was a non-aggressive manner. You're treating me like I might explode. Human volatility is greatly exaggerated in popular culture, Valira said diplomatically. Although her training had indeed included warnings about the species' unpredictable emotional outbursts. Right. Private Reeve flexed his fingers experimentally. So how long until... He suddenly grimaced, his face contorting in what Valira immediately recognized as pain. His heart rate spiked on the monitor. Are you experiencing distress? Valira moved closer, her professional training overriding her caution. Just a twinge. Sometimes happens with fresh stitches when you move wrong, he explained, rolling his shoulder carefully. Then, before Valira's horrified eyes, the human's injured arm began to change. The muscles beneath his skin visibly expanded, growing larger, more defined. The biceps swelled to nearly twice its previous size. Valira froze in shock. Nothing in her training had mentioned this. Was this an allergic reaction? A defense mechanism? Some kind of spontaneous mutation? Emergency! She called out, backing away rapidly, while activating the station-wide medical alert. Code Crimson in Human Ward, Bay 3. Patient experiencing extreme physiological transformation. Private Reeve looked bewildered. What? What's happening? Please remain calm, Valira instructed, though her own bioluminescence was flashing in the Anathari pattern of alarm. Medical assistance is incoming. Your appendage is... swelling. My what is what? Private Reeve looked down at his arm, then back at Valira with complete confusion. The ward doors slid open as 3 medical staff rushed in, led by Dr. Zorlak, whose gelatinous form was pulsating with urgency. Containment field active, announced a Rigelian technician, as a shimmer of energy surrounded Bay 3. What are the symptoms? Demanded Dr. Zorlak, extending a pseudopod toward the monitoring equipment. Spontaneous tissue expansion, Valira reported, her voice steady despite her alarm. The muscular structure in the patient's upper appendage has increased by approximately 97% in volume within seconds. Is this some kind of joke? Private Reeve interrupted, looking increasingly irritated. There's nothing wrong with my arm. Sir, please remain calm, the Rigelian technician said. Agitation may accelerate the process. What process? Private Reeve demanded, his voice rising. I'm not agitated, I'm confused. Dr. Zorlak absorbed the medical readings through his semi-permeable membrane. Fascinating. I've never seen this phenomenon in humans before. Could it be a mutation from their recent wars? Or perhaps a defensive adaptation? I'm right here, Private Reeve said, waving his non-bandaged arm. And I have no idea what you're talking about. Valira, still maintaining a safe distance, pointed at his injured arm. Your muscular tissue. It's expanded dramatically. Private Reeve looked down at his bicep, then back at the medical team with an expression that Valira couldn't quite interpret. Are you serious? I just flexed. Flexed, Valira repeated, unfamiliar with the term in this context. Yeah, flexed. Contracted my muscle. It's something humans do. He demonstrated by relaxing his arm, causing the muscle to return to its normal size, then contracting it again, making it swell once more. See? Totally normal. The medical team watched in silent fascination. Valira felt her energy field fluctuate with embarrassment. "You can control this swelling?" Dr. Zorlak asked, extending a curious pseudopod closer to the human's arm. "It's not swelling," Private Reeve explained, patience clearly wearing thin. "It's just how muscles work when you contract them. Basic human biology." The containment field shimmered and dissipated as the emergency protocol was canceled. Valira consulted her database, searching for references to this flexing phenomenon. To her dismay, she found it listed under Basic Human Physiology, a subsection she had apparently not absorbed thoroughly enough. "Apologies for the misunderstanding," Dr. Zorlak said, his form returning to its normal, non-emergency viscosity. "Our new nurse is still familiarizing herself with human physiological responses." Private Reeve's expression softened as he looked at Valira. "No harm done. First-day jitters happen to everyone." As the other medical staff departed, Valira approached the human again, her luminescence dimmed with professional embarrassment. "I apologize for the incorrect assessment. Private Reeve, it appears I misinterpreted a normal function as an emergency." He shrugged. A distinctly human gesture she had studied, but never quite understood the nuance of. "Call me Jackson. And seriously, don't worry about it. I bet there are plenty of things humans get wrong about your species too." Valira considered this. "That is an accurate assessment. The Human Educational Database contains 17 major errors regarding Anathari physiology." "See? We're all just figuring each other out." Jackson smiled again, and Valira noted the way it altered his entire facial structure. Fascinating how humans could communicate so much through such subtle changes. The awkward moment was interrupted by the arrival of a human doctor, rushing into the ward with slightly disheveled appearance. "Sorry I'm late," Dr. Arlen announced, slightly out of breath. "Emergency in the xenobotany section. Someone brought in a Venusian snapping fern without quarantine clearance." He glanced around at the lingering tension in the room. "Did I miss something?" Jackson and Valira exchanged a look. "Just a small cultural misunderstanding," Jackson explained. "Nurse Valira here thought my arm was about to explode because I flexed." Dr. Arlen blinked, then burst into laughter. "Oh, you mean hypertrophy?" "Yes. That's just a normal human response to high-stress adrenaline and mild trauma. The muscles contract and become more defined, especially in individuals with military training." "I see," Valira said, making a mental note to update her knowledge base. The educational module did not emphasize this aspect of human physiology. "That's because it's so normal for us that we don't think to mention it," Dr. Arlen explained kindly. "Like how you probably don't have a special note in your file about how you glow." "But why would humans evolve to make their muscles larger when injured?" Valira asked, genuinely curious. "It seems counterintuitive to draw attention to a vulnerability." Jackson and Dr. Arlen exchanged glances. "It's not really a conscious thing," Jackson explained. "More like a leftover from our evolutionary past. Shows strength, I guess. Warns off predators, maybe. Or impresses potential mates," Dr. Arlen added with a wink that made Jackson roll his eyes. "Fascinating," Valira said, her scientific curiosity overriding her embarrassment. "Human bodies communicate emotional and survival states through involuntary muscle manipulation." "That's one way of putting it," Dr. Arlen said, checking Jackson's bandages. "Everything looks good here. One more hour of observation and you're cleared for light duty. Private." As Dr. Arlen departed, Valira found herself alone with Jackson again, now viewing him with renewed scientific interest. "May I ask you additional questions about human physiological responses?" she ventured. "My training appears to have significant gaps." Jackson settled back against the medical platform. "Sure, why not? I'm stuck here anyway." For the next hour, Valira learned more about human biology than all her training modules combined. Jackson explained how humans displayed various emotional states physically: blushing when embarrassed, tensing when afraid, standing taller when confident. Valera found it all fascinating, particularly how unaware most humans seem to be of these involuntary signals. "So your species literally wears its emotional state on its skin," she marveled. "And yet you often attempt to conceal your true feelings verbally." Jackson laughed. "Yeah, we're complicated like that. What about Anathari? Do you guys have any weird biological quirks I should know about?" Valera considered the question. "We modulate our energy frequencies based on emotional states, similar to how you described human body language. However, we can control this with training." "So you're better liars than us?" Jackson grinned. "We prefer the term energy modulation specialists," Valera responded, attempting human humor. Jackson's laugh indicated her success. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden tremor that shook the entire medical station. The lights flickered, and the gravity briefly fluctuated. "What was that?" Jackson asked, instantly alert. The station AI's voice came over the communication system, its usual calm tone edged with urgency. "Attention all personnel. Magnetic storm approaching station perimeter. Category 3 severity. All non-essential systems will power down in 60 seconds. Medical staff report to emergency stations." Valera's training kicked in immediately. "We need to secure critical patients and equipment. Magnetic storms can disrupt life support systems." "What can I do to help?" Jackson was already on his feet, all traces of his earlier relaxed demeanor gone. "You're still a patient," Valera reminded him. "Protocol requires you to remain in your assigned bay." Another, stronger tremor shook the station. The lights went out completely for 3 seconds before emergency illumination activated, bathing the ward in a dim red glow. "I think we're beyond protocol," Jackson said, grabbing his uniform jacket from beside the bed. "I've been through mag storms before. They mess with everything electronic." As if confirming his assessment, the medical monitoring systems around them began to flicker and display erratic readings. The doors to the ward slid open, and Dr. Zorlak oozed in rapidly. "Nurse Valera, we need assistance in critical care. The life support systems for the Aquilian patients are failing." "Aquilians breathe liquid methane, right?" Jackson asked, surprisingly knowledgeable for a human soldier. "Correct," Dr. Zorlak confirmed. "The magnetic interference has disrupted their environmental controls. We need to move their suspension tanks to the shielded central hub." "Those tanks must weigh a ton," Jackson said. 1.6 metric tons, Valera corrected automatically. "And we have less than 15 minutes before their methane supply becomes too warm for survival." Without hesitation, Jackson moved toward the door. "Let's go, I can help." "You're injured," Valera protested. Jackson flexed his bandaged arm, wincing slightly but demonstrating mobility. "It's just a cut. And right now, you need every pair of hands you can get." Dr. Zorlak didn't waste time arguing. "Follow me. We've already called for emergency engineering support, but they're dealing with shield failures in 3 sectors." They rushed through corridors now filled with medical staff hurrying to secure patients and equipment. The critical care unit was in controlled chaos when they arrived. 6 cylindrical tanks containing Aquilian patients glowed with an eerie blue light, their temperature indicators already showing dangerous rises. "The manual backup system requires physical relocation," explained a harried technician. "But our usual loading drones are offline from the electromagnetic interference." Jackson surveyed the situation quickly. "We need to make a chain. These tanks have handling bars, right?" The technician nodded. "Yes, but they're designed for mechanical lift assistance." "Well, today they're getting the human touch," Jackson said, already moving to the nearest tank. "We form a line, get as many people on each tank as possible, and move them one by one." Valera hesitated. The weight distribution would require at least 8 Anathari to move one tank, and even then. Her words died as Jackson positioned himself at one end of the first tank, gripped the handling bars, and with a grunt of effort, began to lift. The muscles in his arms and shoulders, including his injured one, swelled visibly with exertion. "Little help here," he called through gritted teeth. Valera and two other medical staff rushed to assist, grabbing other handling points on the massive tank. With coordinated effort, they managed to lift it just enough to clear the floor. "Now walk," Jackson instructed, his face contorted with strain. Inch by inch, they began moving the tank toward the central hub. Valera marveled at the human strength. Despite his injury, Jackson was bearing at least twice the weight of any other individual in their impromptu team. "How are you doing this?" she asked, as they navigated a corner carefully. "Your muscle structure should not support this level of exertion, especially while injured." "Adrenaline," Jackson grunted, sweat now streaming down his face. "Humans get stronger when we need to be." "That's physiologically impossible," Valera argued, even as she witnessed it happening. "Tell that to my burning muscles," Jackson replied with a strained laugh. By the time they reached the central hub, Jackson's injured arm was trembling visibly, the bandage now showing spots of fresh blood. Yet, when they set down the first tank and Valera moved to examine his wound, he shook his head. "No time, 5 more tanks to move." For the next 10 minutes, they worked in determined silence, moving tank after tank to safety. With each trip, Valera watched in scientific amazement as Jackson's muscles seemed to swell further, his body somehow drawing on reserves of strength that should not have existed. By the final tank, his wound had definitely reopened, blood now staining the bandage thoroughly. Yet he refused to stop, positioning himself again at the lead position. "Your injury," Valera began. "Doesn't matter," Jackson cut her off. "These patients will die if we don't move them. I can get stitched up again later." As they lifted the last tank, alarms began blaring throughout the station. "Warning," announced the AI. "Environmental system failure imminent in critical care. 3 minutes to irreversible patient damage." They moved faster now, pushing beyond exhaustion. Valera could feel her own energy reserves depleting dangerously, her bioluminescence dimming to conserve power. With a final heroic effort, they maneuvered the last tank into the shielded area, just as the countdown reached 30 seconds. Medical staff immediately connected the tanks to the hub's protected systems, stabilizing the Aquilian's environment. As the crisis abated, Jackson finally allowed himself to collapse onto a nearby bench. His breathing labored, his injured arm now held protectively against his chest. Valera immediately accessed a medical kit and approached him. "You've reopened your wound and likely torn several muscle fibers," she scolded, though her tone carried no real reproach. "Worth it," Jackson said between heavy breaths, managing a weak smile. "Everyone make it?" "All Aquilian patients are stabilized," Dr. Zorlak confirmed, oozing over to them. "Thanks in no small part to your assistance, Private Reeve." As Valera removed the blood-soaked bandage, she couldn't help but notice how Jackson's muscles, so dramatically swollen during the crisis, were now slowly returning to their normal state. "The expansion," she said quietly, inspecting the torn stitches. "It wasn't just for display, was it?" Jackson looked at her curiously. "What do you mean?" "Earlier, I thought the muscle contraction, the flexing, was merely a communication signal or perhaps a vestigial defense mechanism," Valera explained, applying antiseptic to the reopened wound. "But it serves an actual physiological function. Your muscles enlarge to provide additional strength when needed." "I guess so," Jackson said, wincing as she began re-stitching his wound. "Never really thought about it scientifically before." Dr. Zorlak, who had been listening, extended a curious pseudopod. "Are you suggesting that human muscle hypertrophy is not merely cosmetic but functionally adaptive?" "The evidence suggests so," Valera said, her scientific mind racing with new understanding. Private Reeves' muscles expanded proportionally to the physical demands placed upon them, allowing him to exceed normal strength parameters. Just doing what needed doing, Jackson said modestly. Anyone would have done the same. Incorrect, Valira stated flatly. Most species would have calculated the risk to themselves and acted to preserve their own well-being. You deliberately exacerbated your injury to assist others. Jackson seemed uncomfortable with her analysis. It's not that special, it's just human. Perhaps that is precisely what makes it noteworthy, Dr. Zorlak observed. Nurse Valira, I believe you may have identified an area of human physiology worthy of further study. The magnetic storm passed after several hours, and the station gradually returned to normal operation. Repair crews worked to restore full functionality to all systems, while medical staff ensured that no patients had suffered lasting effects from the disruption. Jackson's wound had been properly restitched and treated with regenerative compounds, though Dr. Arlen had ordered an additional day of observation due to the strain he'd placed on the injury. Completely unnecessary, Jackson complained, as Valira updated his medical chart the following morning. I feel fine. Dr. Arlen indicated that humans often underreport pain levels, Valira said, not looking up from her tablet. He specifically mentioned stubborn military types as the worst offenders. Jackson snorted. Sounds like Arlen. Valira finished her notes and met his gaze directly. I have been authorized to conduct a research study on human physiological responses to emotional and moral stimuli. Would you be willing to participate as a primary subject? Jackson blinked in surprise. Me? Why? You displayed remarkable adaptability during yesterday's crisis. Valira explained. I believe the phenomenon deserves scientific documentation. I'm calling it emotive augmentation, the physical enhancement that occurs when humans respond to moral imperatives. You mean when we see someone in trouble and help out? Jackson clarified. Precisely. Most species experience emotional responses to others' suffering, but humans appear unique in translating that empathy into physical augmentation. Valira's skin brightened with scientific enthusiasm. It's quite extraordinary. Jackson seemed embarrassed by her assessment. You're making it sound a lot more special than it is. I disagree, Valira said firmly. Your species' ability to physically manifest moral courage is worthy of study. It may help us understand why humans, despite your relative fragility compared to many galactic species, have survived and thrived. So you want to, what, monitor me while I lift heavy things? The study would be more comprehensive, Valira explained. We would expose you to various scenarios and measure your physiological responses. All quite safe, I assure you. Jackson considered for a moment. Would it help with the whole interspecies understanding thing? Immeasurably, Valira confirmed. The data could improve cross-cultural medical protocols throughout the Alliance. Then I'm in, Jackson decided. Though I still think you're going to be disappointed. We're really not that special. Valira's luminescence pulsed with what Jackson was beginning to recognize as her version of a smile. I believe the evidence will prove otherwise. Over the following weeks, as Jackson recovered fully and resumed his duties, Valira conducted her study with meticulous care. She documented not only the obvious physical manifestations of human emotive augmentation, but also the more subtle neurochemical changes that accompanied them. What began as a simple misunderstanding, a nurse panicking over a flexed muscle, evolved into a groundbreaking cross-species research project. Valira presented her initial findings to the station's medical board, where they were received with considerable interest. The implications for trauma medicine alone are significant, Dr. Arlen noted during the presentation. If we can better understand how humans summon strength in crisis situations, we might develop protocols to enhance these natural abilities. Or adapt similar techniques for other species, added Dr. Zorlak, who had become a strong supporter of Valira's research. The station commander, a stern Loridian with decades of experience in interspecies medicine, fixed Valira with all four of her eyes. Nurse Valira, your observations have merit. I am authorizing an expansion of your research to include a broader sample of human subjects. Valira's skin glowed with barely contained excitement. Thank you, Commander. I believe this work will benefit all species in the Alliance. See that it does, the Commander replied, her tone softening slightly. Understanding one another beyond mere biology is the foundation of true peace. As the meeting dispersed, Jackson, who had attended as Valira's primary research subject, approached her with a grin. Looks like you're going to be famous, Nurse Valira, discoverer of the incredible swelling human. Valira's skin flashed in the Anathari pattern of amusement. I prefer pioneer in cross-species empathetic physiology, but your term has a certain catchy quality. They walked together through the corridor, an unlikely pair that had become a familiar sight around the station, the glowing Anathari nurse and her human research subject. You know, Jackson said thoughtfully, when I signed up for this exchange program, I figured I'd learn about advanced medical tech. Maybe pick up some alien first aid techniques. Never thought I'd end up being a science experiment. Are you regretting your participation? Valira asked, concerned. Not at all, Jackson assured her. It's actually been fascinating, seeing myself through your eyes. Humans take so much for granted about our own bodies. As do all species, Valira acknowledged. Until we encounter difference, we rarely examine the familiar. They reached the observation deck, now restored to full functionality after the magnetic storm. Through the vast, transparent barrier, the swirling colors of a nearby nebula painted the stars in vibrant hues of purple and blue. Beautiful, isn't it? Jackson said, gazing out at the spectacle. Reminds me a little of your skin when you're excited about a new discovery. Valira felt her energy field fluctuate in response to the unexpected comparison. Thank you. That's a very poetic observation. Us humans aren't all muscle and emergency heroics, Jackson said with a wink. We have our moments of depth too. Indeed, Valira agreed. Your species contains multitudes of contradictions. Physically vulnerable yet incredibly resilient. Individually weak yet collectively strong. Rationally limited yet emotionally profound. Now who's being poetic? Jackson teased. Valira's data tablet chimed with a notification. Your next research session is scheduled for tomorrow at 800. We'll be testing emotional responses to recorded situations of moral conflict. Sounds intense, Jackson said. Will my muscles get to do their impressive swelling thing? That depends entirely on your emotional engagement with the scenarios, Valira explained seriously, missing his humor. Jackson laughed. I was joking, but I'll be there. As they parted ways, Valira returned to her quarters to update her research journal. Sitting at her workspace, surrounded by charts and data on human physiology, she recorded her personal observations. Day 42 of Human Emotive Augmentation Study. Subject continues to display remarkable integration of emotional and physical responses. What I initially mistook for a dangerous biological reaction, the swelling of muscular tissue under stress, I now recognize as perhaps the most elegant adaptation in human physiology. Unlike species that evolved specialized defensive structures, the Vraxtians' toxin glands, or the Hothians' armored exoskeleton, humans developed something far more versatile, the ability to physically manifest their moral courage. Their bodies literally grow stronger when their convictions demand action. It is a reminder that in our quest for interspecies understanding, we must look beyond mere biological structures to the functions they serve in the context of a species' values and social organization. The human capacity for swelling with purpose may seem strange to those of us who evolved along different paths. But perhaps it is precisely these differences that make the Galactic Alliance stronger. Just as Private Reeves' muscles expanded to meet the demands of crisis, perhaps our understanding must expand to embrace the full diversity of sentient experience. Humans, Such strange, contradictory creatures. But when they swell with purpose, galaxies may be saved. Valera paused, recognizing the unscientific sentiment creeping into her analysis. She considered deleting the final line, then decided against it. Some truths transcended pure scientific observation. After all, she had witnessed it firsthand, a human whose body literally grew stronger in response to the needs of others. If that wasn't worthy of both scientific and philosophical contemplation, what was? With a satisfied pulse of bioluminescence, Valera closed her journal. Tomorrow would bring new data, new insights, and perhaps new misunderstandings that would lead to even greater discoveries. In the meantime, she had a research proposal to refine and a presentation to prepare for the Interspecies Medical Conference next month. Her preliminary title, It's Swelling, Human Physiological Responses as Windows into Moral Cognition. It wasn't every day that a simple medical misunderstanding led to a potential breakthrough in cross-species understanding. But then again, nothing about humans was ever quite as simple as it first appeared. And Valera, once so certain she understood human biology through her training modules, was now delightfully committed to a lifetime of learning just how wrong she had been. As the nebula outside cast its colorful light across her quarters, Valera found herself experiencing what humans might call excitement, a curious anticipation of future discovery. Perhaps there was something to be said for emotional responses after all. She made one final note in her personal log. Humans, when they swell, it is not with pride or aggression, but with purpose. Perhaps there is a lesson in that for all of us. In the days that followed, Valera's research expanded beyond Jackson to include other human volunteers stationed on Helix Delta IV. Each new subject confirmed her initial findings while adding nuance to her understanding of human emotive augmentation. She discovered that the phenomenon wasn't limited to physical strength. Humans demonstrated enhanced cognitive abilities, sensory perception, and even immune responses when motivated by what they considered morally significant causes. It's as though their entire biology is designed to respond to meaning rather than mere survival, she explained to Dr. Zorlak during a research review. The traditional evolutionary model suggests adaptations develop for individual advantage, but humans seem to have evolved specifically to protect others, often at personal cost. A curious evolutionary strategy, Dr. Zorlak mused. Perhaps their tribal origins selected for individuals who strengthened the group. That's one hypothesis, Valera agreed. But it doesn't fully explain the extent of the physiological changes we're observing. There's something almost purposeful about it. Her research gained attention beyond the medical station. The Galactic Alliance's Scientific Council requested regular updates, and several prestigious journals published her preliminary findings. Then came the invitation that changed everything. Valera was asked to present her research at the Central Galactic Hub before representatives of all 173 member species of the Alliance. This is an unprecedented honor, Dr. Arlen told her when the news arrived, especially for research still in its early stages. It's because of the timing, explained the station commander. The peace reconciliation treaties are still fresh. Many species are looking for scientific validation of cooperation across evolutionary divides. My research isn't political, Valera protested, her luminescence dimming with concern. All science becomes political eventually, the commander said with the wisdom of experience. Especially science that helps us understand each other better. Jackson was equally impressed when Valera told him about the invitation. The Central Hub? That's Major League. You'll be presenting to the big tentacles. I'm concerned about the implications being overstated, Valera admitted. My research simply documents a physiological phenomenon. I don't want it used to place humans on some kind of evolutionary pedestal. Don't worry, Jackson assured her. No one who's actually met us would make that mistake. We're just as messed up as any other species. even if our muscles do impressively swell from time to time. His humor, as always, eased her anxiety. Will you accompany me to the hub? As my primary research subject, your presence would add credibility to the presentation. Me, at the central hub? Jackson looked genuinely surprised. I'm just a grunt with interesting biceps. You are the origin point of a significant scientific discovery, Valira corrected him. And I would value your support. Something in her tone must have communicated her nervousness, because Jackson's expression softened. Then I'll be there. Just need to clear it with my commanding officer. The permission was granted easily. The human military, it seemed, was equally interested in promoting positive interspecies relations through Valira's research. In the weeks leading up to their departure for the central hub, Valira worked tirelessly to refine her presentation. She meticulously organized her data, prepared visual demonstrations, and rehearsed her explanations until they were precisely calibrated for a diverse audience. Jackson, for his part, submitted to additional tests and recordings that would form part of the presentation. He even agreed to participate in a live demonstration, though he expressed doubt about his ability to perform on command. Emotional responses aren't like turning on a light switch, he explained during their final preparation session. I can't just make my muscles do the thing because you asked nicely. The demonstration will include stimulus materials proven to trigger the response, Valira assured him. And if it doesn't work, we have recorded backup evidence. The journey to the central hub took 3 days by interstellar transport. For Valira, who had never left the sector where she was generated, the experience was both thrilling and disorienting. Jackson, more traveled but still impressed by the scale of the hub, appointed himself her unofficial guide to interstellar travel. The trick is to treat it like one long medical shift, he advised as they watched stars streak by through the observation port. Sleep when you can, eat when you remember, and don't think too much about the fact that we're traveling faster than light in a metal tube through the vacuum of space. That is not particularly reassuring, Valira replied. When they finally arrived, the central hub overwhelmed even Jackson's experienced senses. A massive artificial construct rotating at the confluence of 7 major trade routes. It housed the administrative centers of the Galactic Alliance, along with cultural exchanges, diplomatic missions, and the grand scientific forum where Valira would present her research. I've never seen so many different species in one place, Jackson murmured as they made their way through the bustling central concourse. Beings of every conceivable morphology moved around them, some floating, some crawling, some shifting through phases of matter as they traveled. The Alliance currently includes representatives from 173 officially recognized sentient species, Valira recited, her scientific mind falling back on facts to manage her own awe. Plus, 27 applicant species with observer status. They were escorted to their accommodations by a diplomatic liaison, a graceful Tessian whose translucent appendages moved with liquid precision. The Scientific Council is extremely interested in your research, Nurse Valira, the liaison informed them, particularly in light of recent tensions along the former conflict zones. Valira and Jackson exchanged glances. The peace reconciliation treaties had ended decades of interspecies warfare, but many wounds remained unhealed. My work is purely scientific, Valira said carefully. It documents a physiological phenomenon without political implications. The Tessian's appendages rippled in what might have been amusement. All knowledge has implications, especially knowledge about how different species respond to moral challenges. But fear not. The forum is a place for objective exchange. Their accommodations were adapted for both Anathari and human physiological needs, a testament to the hub's commitment to diversity. Valira found her quarters calibrated to the precise energy frequencies her species required, while Jackson's room next door featured Earth-standard gravity and atmosphere. Pretty swanky for a nurse and a private, Jackson commented when they met later to review the presentation schedule. The scientific forum values knowledge regardless of rank, Valira said. Though privately, she agreed with his assessment. Their treatment suggested their research carried more significance than she had realized. The morning of the presentation arrived with ceremonial gravity. The scientific forum was a vast amphitheater, its architecture designed to accommodate beings of all sizes and sensory capacities. As Valira prepared her materials in the staging area, she was acutely aware of the thousands of entities filling the space, representatives from across the galaxy, all there to hear about human muscles that swelled with purpose. "Nervous?" Jackson asked, adjusting the formal uniform he'd been issued for the occasion. "Anathari do not experience nervousness," Valira stated automatically, then added more honestly. "But my energy field is fluctuating at an elevated frequency." Jackson grinned. "So, nervous. Me too. All those eyes, and other sensory organs I probably don't have names for." Before Valira could respond, the forum's master of ceremonies approached, a Valerian elder whose age was evident in the complex patterns etched into their crystalline structure. "It is time, Nurse Valira," the elder announced, their voice resonating on multiple frequencies simultaneously. "The forum awaits your insights." With a final glance at Jackson, who gave her an encouraging nod, Valira followed the elder onto the central platform. The forum fell silent as she took her position, her bioluminescence automatically brightening to signal her readiness to communicate. The vast chamber, with its tiers of seats extending upward until they disappeared into shadow, suddenly seemed impossibly large. "Distinguished representatives," Valira began, her voice amplified and translated by the forum's sophisticated systems. "I come before you today to present findings on a physiological phenomenon observed in human beings, a phenomenon I have termed emotive augmentation." The massive display behind her illuminated with images of human musculature, including recordings of Jackson during various stages of her research. What began as a simple misunderstanding in a medical ward has led to a deeper understanding of how biology and morality interconnect across species lines. For the next hour, Valera presented her research with scientific precision and unexpected passion. She explained how human muscles physically enlarged in response to perceived moral imperatives, how their strength increased when others' welfare was at stake, and how this adaptation defied traditional evolutionary models. "While most species evolve defensive capabilities for individual survival," she explained, displaying comparative anatomical charts, "humans appear to have developed adaptations specifically for protecting others, often at personal cost." The audience remained attentive, occasionally murmuring as particularly striking data appeared on the display. Valira could sense the growing interest, especially from the scientific council members in their reserved section. Then came the moment she had both anticipated and dreaded, the live demonstration. To illustrate the phenomenon of emotive augmentation in real time, I have asked my primary research subject, Private Jackson Reeve, to join us. She gestured toward the side of the platform, where Jackson now stepped forward, looking decidedly uncomfortable under the collective gaze of the galaxy's scientific elite. "Private Reeve will attempt to lift a weight calibrated to 150% of his established maximum capacity," Valira explained, as a mechanical arm positioned a heavy bar before Jackson. Under normal circumstances, this would be physiologically impossible for him. Jackson took his position, eyeing the weight with healthy skepticism. "However," Valira continued, "we will now present stimulus designed to trigger the emotive augmentation response." The display changed to show images from the magnetic storm crisis, Aquilian patients in danger, medical systems failing, the countdown to environmental collapse. "Private Reeve, please recall the emotional state you experienced during this crisis," Valira instructed. Jackson closed his eyes briefly, his expression changing as he mentally revisited that day. When he opened them again, there was a new intensity in his gaze. He approached the weight, positioned himself correctly, and gripped the bar. For a moment, Nothing happened. Valera felt a flicker of doubt. Had she overestimated the reproducibility of the phenomenon? Then, before the assembled representatives of 173 species, Jackson Reeves' muscles began to swell. Not dramatically at first, but with increasing definition as he applied force to the weight. With a grunt of effort that the translation systems probably rendered in a variety of ways to the diverse audience, Jackson lifted the impossibly heavy weight clear off the ground. A ripple of astonishment passed through the forum. Many species leaned forward to better observe the demonstration. Some even emitted their cultural equivalents of applause. After holding the weight aloft for a full 10 seconds, twice what Valera had asked of him, Jackson carefully lowered it back to the platform, his breathing heavy, but controlled. "As you can observe," Valera said, gesturing to the real-time biological readings now displayed behind her. Private Reeves' muscle mass temporarily increased by approximately 22%. Accompanied by neurochemical changes that enhanced his physical capabilities beyond normal parameters. She moved smoothly into her conclusion, explaining the implications for interspecies medicine and cross-cultural understanding. What we perceive as strange or even threatening in another species may in fact be an adaptation we simply don't yet understand. The human capacity for swelling with purpose reminds us that biology serves values, and values shape biology. Understanding both is essential to true galactic cooperation. As Valera concluded her presentation, the forum erupted in the diverse sounds of approval from multiple species. The Valerian elder stepped forward again, their crystalline structure gleaming with what Valera recognized as the highest form of respect in their culture. Nurse Valera has demonstrated the very essence of the scientific forum's mission, the elder announced. To seek knowledge that bridges differences and illuminates commonalities across the vast diversity of sentient experience. The question period that followed was intense but respectful. Representatives from dozens of species asked for clarification on specific aspects of the research, proposed comparative studies with their own physiological responses, and suggested applications in fields ranging from medicine to diplomatic relations. Throughout it all, Jackson stood quietly at Valera's side, occasionally demonstrating a particular muscular response when asked, but mostly serving as living proof of her findings. When the formal session concluded, they were immediately surrounded by interested scientists and diplomats eager to continue the discussion. Valera noticed that Jackson was receiving particular attention from representatives of physically powerful species, like the Brontarians and Krell, who seemed fascinated by the idea that a relatively fragile human could temporarily match their strength through emotive augmentation. It was several hours before they were able to retreat to a quiet corner of the diplomatic reception that followed the presentation. "You were amazing," Jackson told her, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Had them eating out of your hand, or absorbing through your energy field, or whatever the equivalent is." Valera's bioluminescence pulsed with pleasure at the compliment. "The demonstration was the key factor. Your performance exceeded all projected parameters." Jackson rubbed his arms, which had returned to their normal state. "Yeah, well, it helps when you have the right motivation. Those pictures from the crisis, it brought it all back." "The emotional connection was genuine," Valera agreed. "That's precisely the point of the research. Human physiology responds to authentic moral imperatives, not artificial stimuli." Their conversation was interrupted by the approach of a distinguished figure, the archivator of the Scientific Council herself, a being of such advanced age and knowledge that her species was no longer readily identifiable. "Nurse Valera," the archivator greeted them, her voice carrying the harmonic complexity of one who had studied thousands of languages. "Your research has generated considerable interest among my colleagues." Valera's luminescence dimmed respectfully. "I'm honored by the Council's attention, Archivator." "It is not merely scientific interest," the Archivator clarified. her multifaceted eyes shifting briefly to include Jackson in her gaze. The diplomatic corps has expressed interest in the moral implications of your findings. Moral implications? Valira repeated, concerned. Indeed. In these fragile times of post-war reconciliation, your demonstration of how biology can serve values, rather than mere survival, has resonated deeply. The archivator's voice softened. Many species are reconsidering their assumptions about human motivations in light of your research. Jackson shifted uncomfortably. It's really not that special. Lots of species probably have similar adaptations we just haven't recognized yet. Perhaps, the archivator acknowledged, but it was human swelling that Nurse Valira documented first, and it is human physiology that now symbolizes this principle for many in the Alliance. After the archivator departed, promising future collaboration, Valira turned to Jackson with concerned luminescence. I never intended my research to become politically significant, she said. Jackson shrugged. Science always has consequences beyond the lab. But from what I can tell, they're positive ones this time. You've helped people see humans as something other than the warlike upstarts of the galaxy. Is that how other species view humans? Valira asked, surprised. Some, Jackson admitted. We didn't exactly make the best first impression in the early contact days, and the border conflicts didn't help our reputation. Valira considered this new perspective. Her research, intended as a simple documentation of a physiological curiosity, had somehow become part of a larger narrative about human nature and interspecies relations. I still maintain that my work is primarily scientific, she said finally. Of course it is, Jackson agreed with a smile. But science that helps different species understand each other better? That's pretty much the definition of diplomacy, too. The remaining days at the Central Hub passed in a whirlwind of follow-up meetings, collaborative discussions, and unexpected honors. The Scientific Council formally recognized Valira's research as groundbreaking in the field of comparative moral physiology, a field that apparently hadn't existed until her presentation. Jackson, meanwhile, found himself something of a celebrity among certain diplomatic circles. Several species that had traditionally viewed humans with suspicion now requested his presence at cultural exchanges, eager to witness emotive augmentation firsthand and discuss its implications. I'm not sure whether I'm a scientist or a circus performer at this point, he confided to Valira after a particularly exhausting demonstration for the Javorian delegation. The line between demonstration and performance is philosophically complex, Valira observed, missing his humor as usual. When it was finally time to return to Helix Delta 4, both Valira and Jackson found themselves simultaneously relieved and reluctant to leave. The hub had been overwhelming, but exhilarating, a glimpse of galactic society at its most diverse and dynamic. Think you'll miss the spotlight? Jackson asked, as their transport prepared for departure. Valira considered the question with her typical thoroughness. I will miss the intellectual stimulation and the opportunity for cross-species collaboration, but I am eager to return to more structured research conditions. I'll take that as a yes and no, Jackson said with a grin. Their return to the medical station was met with a hero's welcome of sorts. News of Valira's successful presentation had preceded them, and the staff had organized a small celebration in the recreation area. To Nurse Valira, Dr. Arlen toasted, raising a cup of synthesized celebratory beverage. Who turned a medical misunderstanding into a breakthrough in interspecies relations? And to Private Reeve, added Dr. Zorlak, his gelatinous form shimmering with what everyone now recognized as amusement, whose impressively swelling appendages have become famous throughout the galaxy. Jackson groaned good-naturedly as laughter rippled through the gathering. Later, as the celebration wound down, Valira found herself standing beside Jackson on the observation deck, both of them gazing out at the nebula that had become a familiar sight. What happens now? Jackson asked. With your research, I mean... The Scientific Council has approved funding for an expanded study. Valira replied. We'll be recruiting subjects from different human demographic groups to determine if the emotive augmentation response varies across cultural and genetic factors. Sounds impressive. They've also suggested a comparative study with other species to identify analogous phenomena. Valera continued. The Brontarians have already volunteered to participate, despite their traditional reluctance to engage in medical research. All because you freaked out over my flexed bicep, Jackson marveled, shaking his head. A scientifically inaccurate but essentially correct summary, Valira acknowledged, her luminescence pulsing in what Jackson now recognized as her version of amusement. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the swirling colors of the nebula cast ever-changing patterns across the deck. My tour of duty here ends in 3 months, Jackson said finally. They're reassigning me to the Proxima training facility. Valira felt an unexpected fluctuation in her energy field. That is unfortunate for the research project. You are our primary subject. I thought maybe... Jackson hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. Maybe you could request a transfer too? The Proxima facility has a medical research division. They'd probably jump at the chance to continue your work. Valera's luminescence brightened with surprise. You wish me to relocate my research? I wish you to relocate yourself, Jackson clarified. The research is just a bonus. I've gotten used to having you around, even when you're poking and prodding me in the name of science. Oh. Valera processed this new information, feeling another unusual fluctuation in her energy field. That would be a significant adaptation to my professional trajectory. Jackson smiled at her characteristically technical response. Just think about it, okay? There's time to decide. Before Valira could respond, the station's communication system chimed, and the AI's voice announced, Nurse Valira, please report to Medical Bay 2. Incoming emergency patient requiring anethery energy stabilization. Duty calls, Jackson said. Go save lives. We can talk later. As Valira hurried toward the medical bay, her mind calculated probabilities and considered variables with its usual precision. A transfer to Proxima would offer new research opportunities, but would require significant adjustments to her established patterns. Yet, as she reached the medical bay and prepared to treat the incoming patient, a young Anathari suffering from energy field disruption, Valera found herself contemplating something beyond pure scientific calculation. She had witnessed how human physiology responded to emotional imperatives, how their muscles literally swelled with purpose when values demanded action. Perhaps there was wisdom in that seemingly irrational biological response, a recognition that some decisions transcended logical analysis. Later that night, after successfully stabilizing her patient, Valira updated her personal research journal with a new entry. The study of human emotive augmentation continues to yield unexpected insights, not merely into their physiology, but into the nature of decision-making itself. When faced with complex choices involving both professional and personal considerations, humans often report making decisions based on what feels right, rather than what analysis suggests is optimal. I have long considered this a limitation of human cognition. Now, I wonder if it might instead be an adaptation, an evolutionary recognition that certain decisions require integration of factors too numerous and subtle for conscious calculation. Private Reeve has suggested relocating my research to the Proxima facility when his assignment here concludes. The scientific merits of this proposal are mixed, with both advantages and disadvantages. Yet I find my energy field fluctuating in a pattern that suggests a preference beyond rational analysis. Is this, perhaps, an Anathari version of swelling with purpose? A physiological nudge toward a choice that aligns with values I have not fully articulated, even to myself? Further study is required, but preliminary evidence suggests that what began as an investigation into human physiology may have become an exploration of my own. Valira closed her journal and dimmed her bioluminescence to its resting state. Outside her viewport, the nebula continued its slow, beautiful dance across the stars, a reminder that even in the vastness of space, individual choices created patterns of meaning. Tomorrow, she would inform Jackson of her decision regarding Proxima. But tonight, she would allow herself to experience something rarely acknowledged in Anathari scientific tradition: the surprising wisdom of emotions. After all, as her research had demonstrated, sometimes the body knew what the mind had yet to discover. Sometimes, the swelling meant something important was happening, something worth protecting and preserving. Even for an Anathari nurse who had once panicked at the sight of a flexed human muscle, that was a lesson worth learning.